Today I'm going to be talking about Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly album and why I think it should be considered for the Library of Congress registry. The album touches on many things, one of the main points being race and ethnicity, because the subject matter centers around black culture. I will also be talking about how it breaks the traditional rap genre and how it branches out into jazz and funk. I will also be talking about why I think Kendrick Lamar is an author and how this album kind of solidified that for him, and that's another reason why this album should be placed in the Library of Congress registry. When it comes to the author theory, I consider Kendrick Lamar to be an author when it comes to music in his own right. Even though it's used differently in the world of film, he's still the sole creator of his projects. So in my opinion, that makes him an author, especially since he's a writer as opposed to a visual creator. Now, there are many arguments as to what constitutes anyone as an author, but the main point that I'm bringing up is the fact of his personal style, one that manifests forms of politics, social, and cultural aspects that hold personal significance as stated in Understanding Film Theory. And this is seen throughout all of Kendrick's discography. Using Francis Truffaut's argument that was used in his text, a certain tendency of French cinema, he placed more emphasis on the writers who he believed were the most important to a film and only critiqued their writing as opposed to film and the use of visuals, which, like I said, feels more in tune with Kendrick Lamar since he is solely a writer. Andrew Saris also tells us to be considered an author, one must master the concentric circle that consists of technique, personal style, and interior meaning, which Kendrick has mastered according to critiques and various other music outlets that have dubbed Kendrick the king of hip-hop, and whose songs have been used to spread a larger message when it comes to the black race, politics, and trying to end gang violence. And Sarah says that the most important is interior meaning, which is displayed in this album due to the content of the album at hand. Now, as for genre, To Pimp a Butterfly is a rap album, yet it contains elements that blend jazz, funk, spoken word poetry together to make a piece that still embodies hip-hop, but it branches out further to create a more well-rounded project. Now, with artists such as Thundercat, Flying Lotus, Kamasi Washington, George Clinton, Robert Glasper, Terrence Martin, and more, they were able to bring those elements of jazz and funk throughout the album. Now, the reasons that the genres work so well for Kendrick Lamar and this album is because these genres were created by black culture, and it's put into an album where it's highlighting black culture and black excellence. Now, he was able to find a middle ground to blend it all together and make a conscious effort to not only appeal to rap fans, but be able to have a wider range of an audience to actually appreciate his music and the message that he was sending throughout this album. Jazz music started back in the 20th century by artists such as Jelly Roll Morton and the original Dixieland Jazz Band, which then spread to places like Chicago and New York. And this was popularized by the 20s by people like Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and many more jazz artists. And it has strong black roots, which inspired funk to later emerge within the 60s with people like James Brown, and then hip-hop came later around the 80s. Hip-hop was a combination of poetry, and in this case, spoken word poetry, which also has roots that trace back to Western Africa. Now, we can see the influence of jazz and funk and hip-hop and poetry throughout the album, especially throughout the visuals that Kendrick Lamar had released, such as the music video I, where it opens up in a jazz club with a quartet performing in the background while everyone's partying, and then it cuts to a roof scene where they are also partying with the same jazz quartet. And then we also get cameos from soul musicians such as George Clinton and Ron Isley. In the music video for Free, we also get to sit through the visuals that bring us art that is deemed what I found black Moors and black portraitures that give us that New Orleans vibe, along with the opening scene being a choir and a jazz band performing the intro. Now, in the video Alright, we're given a small excerpt of the poem that develops over the course of the album, which he titles Another Nigga, and the full version appears towards the end of the track Mortal Man, where he touches on his own depression, survivor's guilt, gang, and also himself, whether he's something special or just another person. With these lyrics, visuals, and instrumentals being the main thing, that are taken into consideration for an album, we can categorize the album in Rick Altman's take on genre by looking at the semantics, which is supposed to be the building blocks of a genre, where we look at the instrumentals used, the melodies, the vocals, and the visuals given to us in videos, while also applying syntax, which is supposed to be the deeper meaning of an album, or the deeper meaning, and that's where we take a look at the lyrics laid over the tracks, since the lyrics are what contain the overall message for the album. And in this album, this isn't the first time that jazz, rap, and funk have crossed paths, but according to Del Cowie, writer for CBC Music, he writes, "This is a fresh take on jazz in the hip-hop world, as Kendrick employed jazz musicians to create something new and brought jazz back into the spotlight in today's world." And then once we get onto the hip-hop side of things, Bell Hook makes a point of what rap was during 1997 in her interview, where at the time she states that although rap was diverse, what's usually being pushed out is the ignorant rap, or the more sexualized, commercialized version of rap. Yet this isn't the case for To Pimp a Butterfly, because it's more of a conscious piece, except for King Kunta, where the visuals for it seem to be reminiscent of that, where you have a gang of men, 40 ounces, cars, and women twerking. Even though the content of the album is much different, yet this is the only track on the album that feels more rap than jazz, but it still flows well with the content of the album. This album was a genre hybrid that was able to break what a traditional rap album is, and it can't be placed in one category of music, whether it be funk, jazz, or rap, or soulful, or anything like that. It transcended its original boundaries and was able to breathe new life into what was thought to be a dying genre. Incorporating a poem within the album also helped this album seem like a more conscious effort as well, and it did it so well that the poem itself did not feel out of place. When listening to the album, race has played a huge part throughout the whole album, from beginning to end. Kendrick uses race and ties it into police brutality, gangs, black people as a commodity in a way, and trying to uplift black people by loving yourself, with songs such as I and Complexion. Now, the intro song, Wesley's Theory, and For Free touch on the issue of money and how it affects someone that's made it into the entertainment industry, especially black people, as this song is named after Wesley Snipes and how he had got caught for tax evasion, and he was the example to follow for being more responsible with your money as an artist or as an entertainer. According to Kendrick Lamar, this song came from a place where he was at mentally when he first broke into the music industry, with thoughts of going crazy with his money, where he says that he wants to buy lavish items such as cars, jewelry, clothes, and many other things. But he also talks about how in school handling money isn't taught to anyone, and how they can easily get caught up in a trap that was set for them from the beginning. Yet later in the song, there's a line that reads, "What you want, you a house, a car, 40 acres and a mule, a piano, a guitar, anything, see my name is Uncle Sam, I'm your dog, you can live at the mall, I know you're kind, that's why I'm kind." And then it goes on to say, "We should have never gave you niggas money." And this alludes to the desires of rappers when they have money in their pockets. But in these lines, Kendrick is referring to successful black people, since he's speaking as Uncle Sam because of the general stereotype that rappers will waste their money on chains, cars, land, and more. The line 40 acres and a mule refers to what former slaves were promised as reparations for being enslaved and then being free. But in this sense, Uncle Sam is enticing them with that, as Kendrick is now able to afford anything that he wants, yet still has no real knowledge of the economic repercussions that it could have on him if he doesn't learn to manage his money well. Bell Hooks made a great point when it came to rappers and their wealth versus what the labels they're signed to get paid. Now, according to Kendrick Lamar, the title of the album, To Pimp a Butterfly, means this: using my celebrity for good, not being pimped by the industry through my celebrity. Because when Hooks brings up this topic, it's if the music is authentic, or if it's something that the label wants in order to make money off the artist as a commodity, instead of looking at the artist as a person with creative capabilities. Yet this wasn't the case for this album, as Kendrick Lamar is more responsible from learning from others' mistakes, and Kendrick Lamar isn't really putting out music that is ignorant. He's putting out music that is socially conscious, that people will gravitate towards, as opposed to just kind of pick up and listen to for a week and then just drop. The second single released from To Pimp a Butterfly was The Blacker the Berry, and this song alone touches on every topic within the race theory, from stereotypes, fetishization, ethnicity, and touches on W.E.B. Du Bois' notion of double consciousness, where he disassociates himself as an African American and refers to him only being African while continuing to ask America, You hate me, don't you? You hate my people. Your plan is to terminate my culture. Where it highlights the relationship that African Americans have with America and how it's a love-hate type of relationship, where the black man cannot fully relate to either side because of his lack of knowledge of the motherland, yet the disdain that America apparently has for the black man, along with cultural appropriation, as they take away from the culture because they possibly like it, yet they don't accept the black race. The song goes on to cite physical stereotypes of black men, such as having a round nose, nappy hair, large genitalia, and, quote, being a proud monkey. In the last lines of the song, he cites the hypocrisy in the black community when it comes to the killings of innocent black people. And he writes, "So why did I weep when Trayvon Martin was in the street when gangbanging make me kill a nigga blacker than me, hypocrite?" Which basically highlights gang violence, where there's a public outcry when a white officer kills someone of minority, mainly being black people, versus when it's black on black crime because of gang affiliations. And that's what Kendrick Lamar is trying to highlight here. In this album, race plays such a huge part because of the time that the album was released at. It was released in 2015, and this was probably at the height of census killings of black people at the hands of police, with people such as Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, and Sandra Bland, just to name a few. And it also highlights that in a subtle way, and was also used to help empower the Black Lives Matter movement with songs such as I and Alright, where they were basically the anthems for Black Lives Matter. Now, that concludes my video on why I think this album should be placed in the Library of Congress registry, solely based on the way that he was able to blend jazz, funk, and poetry on a rap album. How he was able to highlight social issues that are going on today, or that were going on at that time, and still relate to what's going on today. And how this album shaped Kendrick Lamar to be an author in the sense of the theory itself.